The train screeched to a halt, a plume of steam escaping into the hot, dry air of Silver Creek, Colorado. Eliza stood on the platform, her small leather satchel clutched tightly in her gloved hands. The town was exactly as the letters had described, a collection of dusty wooden buildings huddled together against the vast, unforgiving landscape. The year was 1888, and the promise of a new life as a mail-order bride had brought her from the bustling green hills of Vermont to this barren frontier. She saw him immediately, Benjamin Thorne, a man whose letters had been both kind and reserved, stood by a wagon, his broad shoulders and weathered face a testament to a life of hard labor. He wasn't smiling. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, scanned the small group of new arrivals before landing on her. He tipped his hat. "Eliza?" he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm Ben." "Yes," she replied, her voice softer than she'd intended. "It's good to meet you, Benjamin." He took her bag and helped her into the wagon without another word. As they rode through the main street, the dust swirled around them, coating everything in a fine layer of brown. The town was quiet, the few people they passed offering only quick, indifferent glances. Eliza tried to make conversation, asking about the ranch, the community. Ben's answers were short, almost curt. "It's a lot of work. The ranch is 5 miles out. The land is what it is." A sense of dread began to settle in her stomach. This wasn't the warm, welcoming man from the letters. When they finally arrived at the Thorne Ranch, she saw why. The house, a simple log cabin, was well maintained, but the land around it looked desolate. More importantly, 2 small children stood by the porch, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. A girl, no older than 6, with tangled brown hair and a worn dress, and a boy who looked about 4, clutching a tattered rag doll. Ben stopped the wagon and turned to her. "Eliza, these are my children, Lily and Thomas. Their mother, she passed away last year." The little girl, Lily, stepped forward, her voice a fragile whisper. "Are you our new mommy?" Eliza's heart ached. She looked at Ben, who seemed to be holding his breath. "Yes, honey," she said, her voice full of a warmth she didn't know she had. "I'm Eliza." Thomas hid behind Lily's legs, peeking out nervously. Eliza carefully climbed down from the wagon, her eyes fixed on the children. They looked so small, so alone. Lily's question hung in the air, a plea that went beyond her words. Eliza knelt down, bringing herself to their level. "You can call me Eliza for now," she said gently. "I'm here to help." Ben watched the interaction, a flicker of something she couldn't identify crossing his face. Relief? Uncertainty? He turned and began unloading her bag, the silence growing heavy between the adults. The children, however, were captivated. Lily slowly extended a hand, and Eliza took it. The little girl's hand was so small, so trusting. It was in that moment that Eliza knew her new life wouldn't be about a husband or a home, but about 2 lost children who needed her more than anything. The first week at the Thorne Ranch was a study in quiet despair. The house was spotless, but eerily silent. Lily and Thomas were well behaved to a fault, their movements small and their voices hushed. They ate their meals without a sound, their eyes glued to their plates. Eliza tried to draw them out, asking about their day, their favorite stories, anything to fill the void. Ben, too, was a man of few words, spending his days working on the ranch and his evenings staring into the fire, a distant look in his eyes. Eliza learned that the children's mother, Sarah, had died from a fever that had swept through the territory. The loss had been devastating, and Ben had withdrawn, burying himself in his work and leaving the children to navigate their grief alone. She saw the evidence of their neglect in their worn clothes, their unkempt hair, and the way they flinched at loud noises. They were not abused, she realized, but simply forgotten in their father's profound sadness. One evening, as she was tucking Lily into bed, the little girl spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Mommy used to sing to us." Eliza's heart twisted. She sat on the edge of the small bed. "Would you like me to sing for you, Lily?" Lily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Eliza began to sing a lullaby from her own childhood, her clear, gentle voice filling the silent room. As she sang, Thomas, who had been in the other room, crept to the doorway and listened, his little face a mixture of wonder and sadness. The song was a small crack in the wall of silence that had surrounded them. When she finished, Lily was asleep, a faint smile on her face. Eliza went to Thomas, who was still standing by the doorway. She picked him up, holding him close. He didn't resist. He was so small and light. She carried him back to his room and tucked him in, humming the lullaby softly. For the first time, she felt a connection, a purpose beyond being a wife to a distant man. Her mission was to bring light back into this dark, silent house. The next day, Eliza took a bold step. She decided to change the rhythm of the house. She started by mending the children's clothes, using scraps of fabric she had brought with her to add splashes of color. She braided Lily's hair, tying it with a small ribbon. Thomas, for the first time, asked her for something, a story. "Tell me about where you came from," he said, his little voice still a bit shaky. Eliza sat them down by the fire and described Vermont, the green mountains, the deep snows of winter, the bustling town with its bakeries and shops. She told them about the maple trees and how sap was collected to make syrup. Her words painted a picture of a world far different from their dusty, harsh reality. Lily and Thomas listened with rapt attention, their eyes wide with wonder. Ben came in from the fields, covered in dust and sweat, and stopped in the doorway, watching them. The sight of Eliza with his children, their faces illuminated by the firelight, was a jolt. He'd been so consumed by his grief that he hadn't noticed how much life had drained from his home. He saw the new ribbon in Lily's hair, the small patch on Thomas's overalls. He saw a glimmer of the hope he had lost. Later, as they ate dinner, Ben spoke more than he had in days. He asked Eliza about her own family, her journey. He was still guarded, but the ice was beginning to melt. Eliza, in turn, asked him about the ranch, the horses, the cattle. She made an effort to understand his world, and he, in a small way, was starting to open up to hers. The meal was no longer a silent ritual, but a hesitant conversation. Eliza's presence slowly began to transform the ranch. She cleaned the house thoroughly, organized the pantry, and even started a small garden, determined to grow something green in the arid soil. She took the children on walks to the nearby stream, teaching them to identify different plants and small animals. The children's laughter, once a foreign sound, began to echo through the house. One afternoon, Ben told her they needed to go into town for supplies. The trip was a new experience for Eliza. Silver Creek was a hard, rough town. The saloon was loud. The streets were filled with men with calloused hands and grim faces, and the few women she saw seemed to move with a sense of weary caution. As they shopped, Eliza felt the stares of the townsfolk. They knew she was the new mail-order bride, and their gazes held a mixture of curiosity and judgment. A woman with a severe face and a sharp tongue, Mrs. Peterson, cornered her in the general store. "Heard you're the new Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Sarah was a good woman. Don't know if anyone can fill her shoes." The words stung. Eliza stood a little taller. "I'm not here to replace anyone, Mrs. Peterson. I'm here to take care of Benjamin and the children." The woman snorted, but a younger woman, a kind-faced storekeeper named Mary, stepped in. "Leave her be, Martha. Let the woman find her feet." Mary gave Eliza a small, knowing smile. "It's a tough life, but we get by. Come see me any time if you need a friend." Eliza felt a wave of relief. The encounter was a stark reminder of the challenges she faced, not just with her new family, but with an entire community. The Old West was a place of deep-seated traditions and suspicions, and she was an outsider trying to find her place. As she walked back to the wagon, holding Thomas's hand, she knew that gaining the trust of this town would be as difficult as winning over Ben and his children. The next weeks were filled with small victories and persistent challenges. Eliza's bond with Lily and Thomas deepened every day. They began to call her Mama, a word that filled her with a profound sense of purpose and belonging. She taught them to read and write, using old newspapers and a small slate she found in the cabin. The children blossomed under her care, their faces losing their pinched, sad look and filling with the light of childhood. Ben, however, remained distant. He appreciated her work, the clean house, the healthy children, but he was still a stranger to her. He worked from dawn until dusk, and when he came in, he was exhausted, his mind miles away. Eliza tried to reach him, to talk about their shared future, but he would simply nod and change the subject. She knew his grief was deep, but his refusal to let her in created a chasm between them. One evening, after the children were in bed, Eliza confronted him. "Ben, we can't keep living like this," she said softly. "The children need us to be a family. They need a father who is present, not just a man who works the land." He bristled, his eyes a cold gray. "I'm doing my best, Eliza. This land doesn't work itself. They have a roof over their heads and food on the table. Isn't that enough?" "No, it's not," she insisted, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's not enough to just provide. They need love. They need you. They miss you, Ben. I see it every day." He stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. "You don't understand," he said, his voice raw with pain. "Sarah, she was everything. I promised her I'd take care of them. And now you're here, and it feels like I'm betraying her." The confession hung in the air, a raw and honest admission of his struggle. Eliza's anger melted into empathy. She walked to him and gently placed a hand on his arm. "Ben," she said, her voice filled with compassion, "she would want you to be happy. She would want her children to be happy. She would want them to have the love you can give them. This isn't a betrayal. It's a way of honoring her memory by making them safe and loved." He turned, his eyes filled with unshed tears. For the first time she saw the full weight of his grief. He was a good man, a man of honor, and he was drowning in his sorrow. Eliza didn't say another word. She simply reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away. It was a small, fragile moment of connection, but it was a beginning. The summer turned into a brutal drought. The sun blazed down relentlessly, turning the fields to dust and the stream to a mere trickle. The crops withered, and the grass for the cattle turned brown and brittle. Ben's face grew more strained with each passing day. He was losing everything he had worked so hard for. One afternoon, a group of men rode up to the ranch. They were the neighboring ranchers, their faces grim. "Ben," one of them, a man named Jake, said, "the creek's drying up. Our cattle are getting desperate. We're going to have to move them. But there's only one water source left for miles. The springs on the ridge." Ben's face tightened. "That's my land," he said, his voice low. "We know," Jake replied, "but we're all in this together. We'll just need to graze our cattle there for a bit. We'll pay you for it, just for a few weeks until the rains come." Eliza saw the conflict in Ben's eyes. Giving up access to his springs meant risking his own cattle's survival. The springs were their only hope. He looked at her, then at the children, who were standing nervously by the porch. "I can't," he said finally. "The springs are all we have left. If I lose my cattle, my family starves." The men's faces hardened. "This ain't about you, Thorne. This is about survival for everyone. You're a part of this community, like it or not." Jake's voice was now a threat. "We're coming for those springs." After they left, the air was thick with tension. Eliza saw the fear in Ben's eyes. He had made an enemy of his neighbors, and in the unforgiving West, that was a dangerous position to be in. "We'll find a way," she said, her hand on his arm. "We'll find a way to make it through." The next day, Eliza and Ben went into town. The tension was palpable. The townsfolk had heard about the dispute, and they were choosing sides. The men who had come to the ranch were respected members of the community, and their word carried weight. As Ben tried to talk to Mary, the storekeeper, a group of ranchers gathered outside, their faces grim. "You're a selfish man, Thorne," one of them shouted, "thinking only of yourself while our families go hungry." Ben's face was a mask of stoicism, but Eliza could see the hurt in his eyes. She stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady. "He is not selfish. He's protecting his family. His children. What would you have him do? Give up the only water they have left, risk their lives?" Her words were met with silence. No one had considered the children. In their collective desperation, they had only seen a man holding on to his property. Mary, the storekeeper, spoke up. "She's right. Ben's not an evil man. He's a good father. He's just trying to do what's best for his family, just like we all are." The tide of the conversation slowly began to shift. The men began to argue among themselves, some siding with Ben, others with the ranchers. It was clear the drought had fractured the community, but a seed had been planted. The focus was no longer on greed, but on the struggle of a family. Later that evening, after a long, difficult day, Ben turned to Eliza. "Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. "You stood up for me. You barely know me." "I know you now," she replied, a faint smile on her face, "and I know what you're willing to do to protect your children. That's enough for me." The moment was a quiet triumph. The wall between them had finally, irrevocably, fallen. The next day, a small group of ranchers, led by Mary's husband, came to the ranch. They looked different this time, their faces etched with a different kind of resolve. They brought with them a dozen heads of cattle. "We've pooled our resources, Ben," Mary's husband said. "We'll buy feed from a neighboring town, and we'll share the water from your springs. We'll work with you to ration it. We can all get through this, but we have to do it together." Ben was stunned. He looked at Eliza, his eyes full of gratitude. He knew this was her doing, her impassioned defense of his family. He took a deep breath and looked at the men. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all." As they began to work together, a fragile truce was formed. The men worked alongside Ben, their efforts a silent apology. Eliza brought them water and food, her quiet kindness slowly mending the fractured community. The ranch became a hub of cooperation, a small island of hope in a sea of despair. One evening, Ben came to her after the children were asleep. He sat down and took her hand. "Eliza," he began, "you have brought more light into this house than I thought was possible. You saved my children. You saved me, and you taught me what it means to be a man again, a man who can open his heart." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You were always a good man, Ben. You were just buried in your sorrow. I just helped you find your way back." He didn't answer with words. He leaned in and kissed her, a tender, heartfelt kiss that was more a promise than a passion. It was the first time she truly felt like his wife, a partner in this life, not just a caretaker for his children. Weeks later, the sky, which had been a relentless, cloudless blue, finally darkened. The air grew heavy, thick, with the smell of an impending storm. The first drops of rain fell, a gentle, welcome patter that turned into a steady, life-giving downpour. The land drank it in, the dust turning to mud, the earth sighing with relief. The drought was over. The community celebrated, their shared hardship now a source of unity. Ben, Eliza, and the children stood on the porch, watching the rain. The children were laughing, splashing in the puddles. Ben put his arm around Eliza, pulling her close. "We made it," he said, his voice full of a joy she hadn't heard before. "We made it." Life at the Thorn Ranch was no longer a matter of survival, but of living. The garden began to flourish, the fields turned green, and the cattle grew strong again. The silent house was now filled with the sounds of laughter, of stories, of music. Eliza and Ben worked side by side, their relationship deepening with each passing day. They talked about their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. One morning, Lily came to her, a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. "Mama," she said, her voice bright with happiness, "look what I found for you." Eliza took the flowers, her heart swelling with love. "Thank you, sweet girl," she said, pulling Lily into a hug. Thomas came and wrapped his arms around them both. It was a simple moment, a perfect snapshot of a family finally whole. The years passed, and Eliza and Ben's family grew. A son, named after Ben's grandfather, was born a year later, a joyous addition to their little family. Lily and Thomas grew into strong, confident children, their past sadness a distant memory. The Thorn Ranch became a thriving, prosperous place, a testament to the hard work and love that had built it. Eliza never forgot her journey. She often visited Mary at the general store, her friend from the day she arrived, and they would talk about the past. Silver Creek was a different town now, a place of community and support, its people united by their shared history. One evening, as Eliza and Ben sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, she leaned her head on his shoulder. "Remember when I first arrived?" she asked. "I was so scared." "I was too," Ben admitted, his hand finding hers. "Scared that I couldn't be enough for the children, scared to let anyone in." "But you did," she said, squeezing his hand. "You did, and look what we built." He looked at her, his eyes filled with love and a gratitude that ran deeper than words. "You didn't just become their mommy, Eliza," he said, his voice a low, warm whisper. "You became my home, my hope. You are the heart of this family." Eliza smiled, a tear of pure happiness rolling down her cheek. She looked out at the vast, beautiful land that had once seemed so desolate and unforgiving. It was no longer a place of struggle and loss, but a place of love and new beginnings. She had come here for a new life, and in saving a family, she had found her own. The past was behind them, and the promise of a peaceful, loving tomorrow was all that mattered.